Today, we're going to tackle two issues that, believe me, come up constantly for engineering teams. How you actually measure reliability, and then who you hold accountable for it. These aren't just theoretical problems. Getting them wrong is probably one of the fastest ways to completely derail an SRE program before it even gets off the ground.
All right, let's dive right in with the absolute foundation, the Service Level Indicator, or SLI. Now this looks pretty simple, right? It's just a percentage. You take your good events, divide by all the valid events. But the real work, and frankly where a lot of teams get stuck, is in that one little word, good. What does good actually mean for your users? That's the whole game.
So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to get into the big technical choice. Should your SLIs be based on time or on events? Then, we'll switch gears and tackle that messy organizational problem of ownership. And we'll use a super common latency example to see exactly how all this plays out in the real world.
And that leads us right to the first and maybe most fundamental decision any team has to make when they define an SLI. Are you measuring good time or good events? And look, this isn't just about semantics. Your answer here is going to completely change what your alerts mean, how you spend your error budget, and even how you think about failure itself.
So let's kick things off with a time-based approach. The idea here is pretty simple, probably familiar to a lot of you. We're just asking, for what percentage of minutes in a month was our service actually healthy? It's basically a measure of uptime.
And you can see exactly how it works here. You take a whole window of time, same month, and you chop it up into these little equal slices, maybe 1 minute each. Then for every single one of those minutes, you ask a simple question. Was the service good? If your latency spiked or you had too many errors in that minute, then boom, the entire minute gets marked as bad.
So why would you do this? Well, the big draw is that it's just predictable. It's really easy for everyone, not just engineers, to get their heads around a sentence like, we have 20 minutes of downtime left in our budget for the month. And this can work just fine for some internal systems, things with really steady traffic where every minute is more or less the same.
But here's the killer flaw, and in production, it is a major one. A time-based SLI treats 1 minute of failure at 3 a.m. on a Sunday exactly the same as 1 minute of failure during your Black Friday peak. It measures system uptime, sure, but it completely fails to measure user impact. And that disconnect, that's where this whole model just falls apart from most services that people actually use. So that brings us to the alternative, event-based SLIs. With this approach, we completely stop thinking about minutes on a clock, and we start counting what the users are actually doing. The question is no longer about time, it's about interactions. Of all the valid requests we served, what percentage of them were actually good?
And you can really see the mental shift in this visual. We're not looking at a timeline anymore. We're looking at the total amount of work our system did for our users. Our reliability is now just a straight ratio of good requests to total requests. What time it is doesn't matter. What matters is the traffic.
Now this is the real game changer. This method automatically weights your measurement by user impact. An outage during a huge traffic spike is going to burn your error budget way faster because it's affecting way more users. This directly ties your engineering reliability goals to the actual business impact, which is exactly where you want to be.
But, and this is a big but, there's a trade-off. You lose that simple predictability. You can't just say, we have 20 minutes left anymore. Your budget now depends on future traffic, which you can't always predict. And this method is totally unforgiving. A really bad failure during your busiest hour could vaporize your entire month's error budget in just a few minutes.
Okay, so now we're going to shift gears. We've talked about the technical choice of what to measure. Now let's get into the much harder organizational problem of who is responsible for it. This is where so often reliability efforts just grind to a halt.
This right here, this is a foundational rule for a healthy SRE culture, but it gets violated all the time. See, when you make a team responsible for a metric they can't actually control, you don't get accountability. What you get is burnout, you get frustration, and you get a system that never gets better because nobody has the power to actually fix it.
And this image shows you exactly why that principle is so important. A user-facing metric, that total yellow bar, is almost always the sum of a bunch of different pieces. So if you tell a team, hey, you own that whole bar, when they really only control the little green parts, well, you've just set them up to fail. It's not just unfair, it's completely ineffective.
All right, let's make this super concrete with a story that I'm sure a lot of you have lived through. The mobile app feels slow. Users are complaining, product managers are getting nervous, but when you ask, so who owns this latency number? All you get is a bunch of finger pointing, because nobody really knows.
the ownership is totally broken.
So here's our system. It's a pretty standard setup. You've got a mobile team, they own the app code running on the user's phone. And then you've got a backend team, and they own the API service and the database it talks to. This is probably what half the systems out there look like.
So the total latency, the time from when a user taps the screen to when they see the result, is a shared metric. The mobile team controls the green parts. That's time spent on the device, maybe rendering things or parsing data. The backend team, they control the red parts, time spent in their service, querying the database. The key thing is, neither team controls the whole end-to-end experience.
Okay, so we've all agreed it's a shared problem. Now what? The next step is to get out of the theory and put some real numbers on it. How do we take a performance budget and fairly split it up between these two teams?
First things first, you gotta measure. You can't fix what you can't see. So we put the instrumentation in place, and here's what we find. Out of a total of 602 milliseconds of latency, the mobile app is responsible for 285. The backend takes 186, and the network, which is totally outside our control, eats up 131 milliseconds.
Now let's say the product team comes to us and says, our user experience goal is 500 milliseconds max. The very first thing we do is subtract the part nobody can control, that 131 milliseconds of network time. That leaves us with a 369 millisecond shared budget that the mobile and backend teams have to hit together.
So how do you split that shared budget? Well, a really common and pretty fair way to do it is to ask for proportional improvement. That 369 millisecond target is about 78% of the current total. So we go to each team and say, we need you to reduce your part of the latency to 78% of what it is today. And just like that, you get clear, distinct, and most importantly, controllable targets for each team. 222 ms for mobile, 145 ms for backend.
But what happens when a team comes back and says, hey, we can't hit our new target because we're waiting on this other service we don't own? This is the critical last step. Being responsible for a metric means you must also have control over it. And if you don't have control, you have to go get it.
You don't just throw your hands up and accept it. In a high-functioning organization, you fix that broken ownership. And there are really 3 ways forward. 1, you just move the dependency, put it under the control of the team that needs it. 2, you build a new service from scratch that does what you need. Or 3, you just absorb that functionality directly into your own service and get rid of the dependency completely. The point is, you take control.
So this is the question I want you to take back to your own team. Think about your most critical user-facing metric. Now ask yourself, who in your organization is actually accountable for that number? And then ask the really important question, does that person or that team have direct control over all the things that influence that number? Finding and fixing the gaps in that answer, that's how you go from just measuring reliability to actually improving it.